I really don't think she would run away because she's 9. And the way that they've been searching for 2 days, never got any sign of her. So I think that maybe someone kidnapped her or something.
I'm going to ask you because I ask everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do anything to her?
No.
Did you cause her disappearance?
No.
Did you kill her?
No.
Okay. Do you know where she's at right now?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Split her throat. I strangled her.
Strangled her?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You strangled her with your hands?
Yes.
Okay. Why did you pick her?
I don't know. I just did.
Was there something about her? Did you just want to know what it was like to kill someone?
Yeah, I just wanted to know.
I just killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was amazing. These are the actual words written by a 15-year-old girl in her diary, on the same day she murdered 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten. What you're about to hear is one of the most disturbing cases of premeditated child murder in American history. A case so brutal, so calculated, that it will haunt you long after this video ends. Before we dive into this nightmare, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below, and while you're there, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Some people scroll by. You didn't. That means you care. Subscribing is free, but it helps uncover the next hidden case, before it happens again. On a crisp October evening in 2009, in the quiet town of St. Martins, Missouri, a mother's worst nightmare was about to unfold. Elizabeth Olten, a bright-eyed 9-year-old with dreams as big as her smile, was about to become the victim of something so evil, so incomprehensible, that it would shake this small community to its very core. Elizabeth wasn't just any ordinary child. She was the baby of the family, the youngest of 3, living with her devoted mother Patty in a town where everyone knew everyone. This little girl lived and breathed theater. She'd recently landed a starring role in the school play and threw herself into it with the passion only a child possesses. Every single day, she'd run through her lines, begging anyone who'd listen to read the other parts with her. She'd belt out Hannah Montana songs, practice her choreography, and transform any ordinary moment into a performance. Those who knew Elizabeth described her as an angel walking among us. Sweet, innocent, kind-hearted, she had this incredible ability to see the good in everyone. She was the type of child who'd light up a room just by walking into it. Elizabeth and her mother Patty shared an unbreakable bond. They'd spend hours together baking cookies, working on jigsaw puzzles, playing games. Their relationship was pure, beautiful, untainted by the evil that was lurking just 4 houses away. October 21, 2009 started like any other Wednesday. Kids were home from school, the smell of dinner was wafting through the Olten household, and life was normal. Peaceful. Safe. Then came the knock that would change everything forever. A little girl named Emma knocked on Patty's door, asking if Elizabeth could come out to play. Patty's initial instinct was to say no. It was a school night, dinner was almost ready, and she believed in structure and routine. But when Elizabeth heard Emma's voice at the door, both girls launched into the kind of relentless begging campaign that only children can master. Jumping up and down, pleading, promising they'd be back in time. Emma lived just 4 houses away. The children in this neighborhood were constantly in and out of each other's homes, playing together like one big extended family. Against her better judgment, Patty gave in. She looked at her daughter's eager face and said, 1 hour, Elizabeth. 1 hour and no more. I want you home by 6 o'clock sharp. Elizabeth's face lit up with pure joy. She kissed her mother goodbye and skipped out the door, completely unaware that she was walking toward her death. 6:15 came and went. Elizabeth wasn't home. For a child as conscientious and obedient as Elizabeth, being 15 minutes late wasn't just unusual, it was alarming. This was a little girl who lived by rules, who respected her mother's wishes, who had never, not once, deliberately disobeyed. The sun was setting, painting the sky in ominous shades of orange and red, and Patty knew with absolute certainty that her daughter would never voluntarily stay out in the approaching darkness. Elizabeth was terrified of the dark. Panic began to creep into Patty's chest like ice water in her veins. She grabbed her phone and dialed Elizabeth's number. Straight to voicemail. The sound of her daughter's cheerful recorded voice felt like a knife twisting in her gut. Desperate now, Patty called Emma's grandmother, Karen, who lived with Emma and her siblings. The conversation that followed would haunt Patty for the rest of her life. "I haven't seen Elizabeth," Karen said, confusion evident in her voice. "And I had no idea Emma even left the house this afternoon." The phone slipped from Patty's trembling hands. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. By 6:30, police officers were swarming the Olten home and combing through the surrounding area. The street where Elizabeth lived bordered approximately 60 acres of dense woodland, a vast, overwhelming area that would become the focus of an increasingly desperate search. Officers immediately went to Emma's house, but the story they heard made no sense. Karen and Gary, Emma's grandparents, were distraught. They genuinely had no idea any of this had happened. They couldn't provide any information that would help because they simply didn't know Elizabeth had even been there. Emma's story was simple but chilling in its implications. She said they'd been walking through the woods, darting in and out of neighboring yards and backyards, playing the kind of carefree games that children play when the world still feels safe. When the hour was up, she watched Elizabeth walk toward home, just as she'd promised her mother she would. That was the last time anyone would see Elizabeth Olten alive. Police initially found no evidence of foul play. Their working theory was that Elizabeth had simply become lost in the woods, a tragic accident, but an accident nonetheless. When they shared this theory with Patty, her response was immediate and fierce: "She's 9 years old. She wouldn't just walk off by herself. A mother knows. A mother always knows." Soon, nearly a third of the town's entire population was out searching. Neighbors, friends, strangers, everyone united in the desperate hope of bringing Elizabeth home safely. But as darkness fell like a suffocating blanket over the search area, they were forced to stop for the night. None of them slept. As soon as dawn broke, they were out again in full force. The FBI was called in, and the case was escalated to a federal level. This was no longer just a local missing child case, this was every parent's worst nightmare playing out in real time. The media descended like vultures, broadcasting the search efforts across the state. Como 8 News at 6, truly a family's worst nightmare. 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten from Cole County has been missing since yesterday evening. More than 300 volunteers and law enforcement officers scoured a half-square-mile grid search area. The terrain was brutal, rough, hilly, filled with fields, forests, and ponds. Registered sex offenders in the area were interviewed. Every car coming in and out was stopped and searched. Dive teams and helicopters were deployed. Sniffer dogs worked around the clock. Then came a breakthrough, and a new source of terror. Elizabeth's cell phone data arrived from the provider, showing that her phone was still on and pinging near her home, somewhere in the woods. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Maybe she was lost but alive. Maybe she was injured but breathing. Maybe there was still time. But then, just as they were closing in on the phone's location, the battery died. The ping stopped. The electronic lifeline to Elizabeth went silent, and with it, their best lead vanished into the digital void. The forest was dense, dark, damp, and cold. There was an overwhelming amount of ground to cover, and with each passing hour, the likelihood of a positive outcome grew dimmer and dimmer. Elizabeth's phone records revealed her last contacts and messages. Most could be easily accounted for: calls to and from Patty, messages to friends, the normal digital footprint of a 9-year-old's life. But there was one call that stood out, a call from someone named Alyssa. Emma was asked to speak with police again, and this time, her story changed completely. The little girl seemed scared, reluctant to share what she now remembered. She revealed that her 15-year-old half-sister, Alyssa Bustamante, had been the one to encourage her to knock on Elizabeth's door that afternoon. According to Emma's new account, when she and Elizabeth were playing outside, Alyssa joined them. But instead of the three girls playing together, Alyssa encouraged Emma to go home, leaving her alone with Elizabeth. Emma said she walked back to her house and stayed outside playing by herself, while Elizabeth and Alyssa remained together. Later, when Emma fell and caught herself on some thorns in the garden, she called out for help. Alyssa heard her from inside the house and came outside to assist. But as Alyssa helped her, Emma noticed something that would prove to be a crucial detail: what looked like blood on Alyssa's clothes. If Emma's new story was true, it meant she hadn't been the last person to see Elizabeth alive. That distinction now belonged to 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante. Imagine if it was your child, your sister, or your friend. Would you want their story buried under noise, or told with care? Subscribing helps make sure no child's story fades away. 48 hours had passed since Elizabeth vanished, and the investigating team had to face a horrifying reality. This was no accident, no case of a child getting lost in the woods. Elizabeth had either been led somewhere or forced somewhere. Someone had taken her, and that someone might still be out there. An officer decided to look closer to home, conducting another round of house-to-house searches. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, a search party made a discovery that sent chills down everyone's spine. A group of volunteers stumbled upon a massive hole that had been deliberately dug and then carefully covered back over. They immediately alerted police, but when investigators excavated the site, there was nothing underneath, no sign of Elizabeth or anything belonging to her. But when detectives had been at the Bustamante house talking to Emma and Alyssa, they'd noticed something troubling: several holes in the backyard that looked remarkably similar in size and shape to the one found in the woods. A search warrant was immediately issued. Although Elizabeth had never been to the Bustamante house on the day she disappeared, she was a frequent visitor. The children in the neighborhood often played together. So investigators needed to conduct a thorough search of the premises. Everything seemed normal and orderly until they entered Alyssa's bedroom. What they found there painted a picture so disturbing, so chilling, that seasoned detectives would later say it haunted their dreams. The room was in complete chaos. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere, and there was writing all over the walls, some of it in what appeared to be blood. Most disturbing of all was a drawing, the outline of a person with the name Emma written next to it, Emma, her 6-year-old half-sister. Cards from Alyssa's father, who was in prison, were scattered throughout the room. But it was when investigators found Alyssa's diary that the true horror of the situation began to emerge. One entry read, "If I don't talk about it, I bottle it up, and when I explode, someone's going to die." Detectives also noticed a paragraph that had been heavily scribbled over with blue pen, as if someone had desperately tried to hide what they'd written. Using specialized techniques, investigators were able to uncover some of the original writing by shining light on the back of the paper. 2 words stood out like a death sentence: slit and throat. Despite Alyssa claiming she had been at school that day, records showed she had actually skipped classes. Her whereabouts during the crucial time when Elizabeth was last seen alive couldn't be confirmed by anyone. The pieces of this horrific puzzle were slowly coming together, but there were still so many gaps, so many questions that needed answers. Alyssa's diary was seized by the FBI and handed over to Sergeant David Rice, who was now preparing to conduct what would become one of the most crucial interviews in the history of Missouri criminal justice. To understand what happened to Elizabeth Olten, you need to understand the monster who killed her. Alyssa Bustamante was born in 1994 into a world of chaos, neglect, and destruction. Both of her parents struggled with severe substance addictions. Her father was constantly in and out of prison, a revolving door of incarceration that left the family without stability or support. Her mother would disappear for days or even weeks at a time on drug binges, abandoning her children to fend for themselves. Eventually, Alyssa and her siblings went to live with their grandparents, Karen and Gary, who fought for and won full custody. Karen later said she adored Alyssa and did everything in her power to give the children the love, stability, and care they desperately needed after such a traumatic start in life. But the damage was already done. As Alyssa entered her teenage years, dark patterns began to emerge. She started self-harming, cutting words into her arms with razor blades and expressing increasingly violent and suicidal thoughts. After she overdosed on pills in what appeared to be a suicide attempt, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The doctors who assessed her described her as violent and angry, consumed by rage that seemed to burn just beneath the surface. She was diagnosed with severe depression and prescribed antidepressants, but when she was released, things only got worse. Much worse. On her various social media platforms, Alyssa changed her list of hobbies to killing people and cutting. She regularly told friends and her boyfriend that she wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. She described detailed fantasies about burning down a house with an entire family trapped inside, listening to their screams as they died. Her Twitter feed became a disturbing window into a mind consumed by darkness. She posted about her hatred of authority figures and anyone who tried to tell her what to do. One particularly chilling post read, "Bad decisions make great stories." She also posted a video to her YouTube channel titled "Idiots Getting Electrocuted by Electric Fence." The video showed her trying to trick her two younger brothers into touching a fence that she knew would deliver a painful electric shock. She laughed as they writhed in pain, clearly deriving pleasure from their suffering. A disturbing pattern of behavior was becoming impossible to ignore. The more the FBI looked into her background, the more evidence they found pointing toward a dangerous individual who not only wanted to inflict pain on others but was actively planning to do so. After going through more of her diary entries, Sergeant Rice asked Alyssa to come in for a formal interview, accompanied by her grandmother and a juvenile officer. His strategy was psychological warfare. He would ask a question and then sit in complete silence for as long as possible, sometimes for up to a minute at a time. The silence was uncomfortable, oppressive, suffocating. But Rice knew that if there was something to say, and he was absolutely certain there was, the tension would eventually break. Someone would have to fill that silence, and when they did, the truth would come spilling out. He needed to know what had happened to Elizabeth that day, and he wasn't going to stop until he got answers. Alyssa started by recounting her version of October 21st. She claimed she had come home from school around 3:30 and then gone for a walk in the forest around 4:30 or 5 o'clock. But investigators already knew she was never at school that day. She was already trapping herself in a web of lies. She said she was supposed to take her little half-sister Emma on the walk but ditched her because she found her annoying. Instead, she claimed, she went walking alone in the woods and came back about an hour later. She was up in her room when she heard Emma shouting for help from outside. Sergeant Rice had her retrace her steps using a map he had printed out, watching carefully for inconsistencies in her story, for tells that would reveal she was lying. The interview continued for hours, with Rice methodically poking holes in every aspect of her story. He then shifted his line of questioning to the holes around her garden and in the woods. Alyssa calmly admitted to digging them herself, but claimed it was simply because she liked digging holes and sometimes buried dead animals in them. The casual way she discussed this disturbing hobby sent chills through everyone in the room. Rice then asked her a question that cut straight to the heart of the matter: "What kind of person do you think would do this to a 9-year-old girl?" Alyssa shrugged with the kind of indifference that would make your blood run cold. "I don't know. A sick person. Someone who can put down all their morals." She was still maintaining her innocence, still claiming she had never been alone with Elizabeth, still insisting she was trying her best to help find the missing girl. But Rice wasn't finished with her yet. He started asking questions about Elizabeth's phone, explaining that technology doesn't lie. The cell phone data was indicating that Elizabeth's phone had been somewhere behind Alyssa's house, deep in the woods she claimed to know so well. He then moved on to the search of her house and bedroom, the evidence that painted such a disturbing picture of her state of mind. When Rice confronted her about the diary entries, including the one that had been scribbled over with blue pen, the interview took a dramatic and devastating turn. "We talked earlier about technology," Rice said, his voice steady but his eyes boring into hers. Even if you write something down and then take a pen and try to scratch it out, that doesn't make it go away. It's still there. The silence in the room was deafening. We have your diary. We've read your diary. Including the last entry. Where is she? For the first time since the interview began, Alyssa's composure cracked. I don't know, she whispered, but her voice betrayed her. You need to tell us the truth. You need to tell us what happened. If this was an accident, that's fine. We can deal with that. This family needs closure. What happened next would forever be burned into the memory of everyone in that room. Let's start at the beginning, Rice said. Is this something that was planned out, or was this just an accident? And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Alyssa Bustamante confessed to murder. I strangled her. The room fell into stunned silence. I didn't know what to do, so I buried her body. Rice pressed for more details, and Alyssa spun a story about the girls playing in the forest when Elizabeth allegedly fell, hit her head, and died instantly. Panicked, she claimed, she had tried to conceal the body by burning it. But Rice knew this wasn't the whole truth. The diary entry that had been scribbled over had now been completely uncovered by FBI specialists, and what it revealed was far more sinister than an accident. The entry read, I just killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the, oh my god, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kind of nervous and shaky though right now. I gotta go to church now. LOL. It had been written on October 21, 2009, the same day Elizabeth Olten disappeared. Rice told her they would find Elizabeth's body eventually, and when they did, an autopsy would reveal the full truth about how she died. They will know on the autopsy if she was shot, if she was beaten, if her throat was cut. How did she die? 9-year-old girls don't just die. Was her throat cut? Yes, Alyssa admitted. The confession continued to unfold like a nightmare. Alyssa told Rice that she had encountered Elizabeth and Emma outside. Once Emma left, everything started to unravel according to her premeditated plan. Despite her previous denials, this wasn't an accident at all. It was cold-blooded, calculated murder. She had armed herself with a kitchen knife from her grandmother's house. Taking Elizabeth's small hand in hers, she led the trusting 9-year-old on a 15-minute walk deep into the forest, telling her she had something special to show her, something wonderful waiting just a little further ahead. The fear that Elizabeth must have felt as the forest grew darker around them, as she began to realize something was terribly wrong, as she understood that her life was in mortal danger, it's unimaginable. The terror of those final moments, when innocence came face to face with pure evil, will haunt everyone who heard this case forever. Once they reached the predetermined spot, Alyssa said she beat Elizabeth unconscious, strangled her until she stopped breathing, slit her throat, and then stabbed her repeatedly, over and over again, long after the little girl was already dead. She then attempted to burn the body before digging a hole to bury her and disposing of the evidence in the nearby creek. But Rice knew something Alyssa didn't think he knew: the hole had not been dug on the day of the murder. It had been dug days, possibly even weeks before. As were all the other holes they had found scattered throughout the woods. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. This was premeditated murder in the first degree. If Rice could get her to admit to pre-digging the grave, it would help prove beyond any doubt that this was planned, calculated, and executed with deliberate intent. You didn't dig that hole with your hands, Rice pressed. How long were you out there? I was out there for like 5 hours, Alyssa finally admitted. Everyone still found it hard to believe that a 15-year-old girl had managed to carry out such a horrific crime entirely by herself, but Alyssa insisted she was the only one involved, the only one who knew about it. What we're going to do right now, Rice said, is get some things lined up to go out there and have you point out the site where she's at. Alyssa Bustamante agreed to take investigators to Elizabeth's remains. Just 15 minutes from her home, the search for Elizabeth Olten came to a devastating end. If stories like this make you want to protect the innocent and expose the truth, then don't just watch. Subscribe. That single click could be the reason another story finally gets heard. The day after Elizabeth's body was discovered, police announced they had placed the 15-year-old suspect under arrest and charged her with first-degree murder. The neighborhood that had been united in hope was now shattered by the reality of what had happened in their midst. The case now centered on a critical legal question: should the suspect be tried as an adult or as a juvenile? A detention hearing was scheduled, followed by a certification hearing that would determine the trajectory of the entire case. Police had also interviewed Alyssa's boyfriend and administered a polygraph test. Although they suspected he might have known something was wrong, she had, after all, repeatedly told him she wanted to know what it was like to kill someone. They determined he had no direct involvement in Elizabeth's murder. Given the diary entry investigators had uncovered, there was no other explanation for what had happened. Alyssa had dug at least 2 graves in the weeks leading up to the murder, essentially lying in wait for the perfect opportunity. It remains undetermined who, if anyone, the second grave was intended for, but police suspected she may have been planning to kill her 2 younger brothers as well. On October 28, exactly 1 week after she had gone missing, 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten was laid to rest. Her favorite color was pink, and her funeral was a sea of that beautiful, innocent hue. A horse-drawn carriage carried her pink and white casket through the community that had searched so desperately for her. The small church was packed beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and waiting outside in the cold. Emergency responders and investigators sat in the front rows. This case had affected everyone who touched it, leaving scars that would never fully heal. "I hope justice is served, I really do," said one community member through tears. "Because it's not right. She was just innocent. She didn't do nothing to deserve to be killed the way she was killed. She didn't have a chance at life." Elizabeth's father, who was incarcerated at the time, was granted permission to attend his daughter's funeral. His grief was raw, overwhelming, impossible to witness without feeling your own heart break. "Don't feel sorry for me," he said to reporters. "Feel sorry for my daughter. Feel sorry for her siblings. Feel sorry for the world, because they're missing out on a beautiful child. I have my guilt. I've done wrong, I wouldn't be here otherwise. But I should have been out there protecting my daughter. I should be out there every day protecting my family. If I could, I'd go back and do that." In November 2009, despite her lawyer's arguments for a lesser charge based on her troubled childhood and age, the judge ruled that Alyssa Bustamante would be tried as an adult for first-degree murder. She entered a plea of not guilty, and trial preparation began in earnest. But just when Elizabeth's family and the prosecution thought they were finally getting somewhere, a devastating blow came in June 2011. Alyssa's defense team successfully argued that her lengthy confession to Sergeant Rice should be thrown out of court. A judge ruled that because of her age and the specific line of questioning used, at least part of her statement would not be admissible in court. Her trial was delayed and rescheduled for early 2012. The prosecution knew they were facing an uphill battle. After extensive deliberation, they decided to offer Alyssa a plea deal: second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder. This would spare her the possibility of receiving the death penalty while still ensuring she faced serious consequences for her actions. Alyssa Bustamante withdrew her not guilty plea for first-degree murder and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder instead. The courtroom was packed on sentencing day. Everyone wanted to see justice served, wanted to witness the end of this nightmare that had consumed their community for so long. As part of the plea agreement, Alyssa had to recount exactly what had happened that October day. As she went through the horrific details of how she had murdered Elizabeth, in all its awful, graphic detail, reporters said the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Everyone sat in stunned, horrified silence as she described the deliberate, calculated way she had ended a child's life. Her defense team spoke as well, leaning heavily on her troubled childhood, her mental health issues, and claiming that her prescribed medication had made her more prone to violence. Despite all the mitigation arguments, Alyssa Bustamante was sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder and an additional 30 years for armed criminal action. The sentences were to be served consecutively. However, several months later, the United States Supreme Court ruled that juveniles cannot face automatic life sentences without the possibility of parole. Under Missouri law, this meant that Alyssa might be eligible to seek parole after 30 years. At her sentencing, Patty Olten gave a victim impact statement that broke the hearts of everyone present. She was shaking so violently, so overcome with grief and rage, that the judge eventually had to ask her to stop. All Alyssa could offer in response were hollow, scripted words, "I cannot even understand what you guys are going through," adding that she would give her life to bring Elizabeth back. A detective present that day said it was at this moment that Karen and Gary, Alyssa's grandparents who had raised her and stood by her through everything, got up and walked out of the courtroom. Everyone could see the moment when Alyssa suddenly realized that the only two people who had stuck by her, who had tried to provide love and stability in her chaotic life, had finally given up on her. Patty later said that everything that came out of Alyssa's mouth was a lie, that she showed no genuine remorse, and that she was simply reciting words her lawyers had told her to say. Prosecutor Mark Richardson said he had never seen anything like this case in his entire career and hoped to never have to try a case like it again. "The motive has to be the most senseless, reprehensible that could be in humankind," he said, "and that is to take a life for a thrill." A forensic psychologist who evaluated Alyssa added that it was clear from her patterns of behavior over the years that it was only a matter of time before she killed somebody. The signs were all there, the warning bells had been ringing loudly for anyone willing to listen. "This took me hours of painful research, reading autopsies, police files, and the cries of mothers that were ignored. If you feel safe watching from your screen, then please support what we do by giving us a super thanks. We will really appreciate it." Patty went on to sue not only Alyssa but also the psychiatric hospital where Alyssa had sought treatment. She believed that the healthcare system should have recognized the red flags and taken preventative measures to protect the community from what Alyssa was clearly capable of doing. A judge threw out the lawsuit against the hospital, but the lawsuit against Alyssa was successful. She will ultimately owe Patty $5 million, money that will never bring Elizabeth back, but money that represents some form of accountability for the irreparable damage she caused. Alyssa appealed her sentence in 2014, but this was denied. She remains incarcerated today, and barring any changes in the law, she will not be eligible for parole until 2039 at the earliest. The events that transpired so quickly on October 21, 2009, rocked the small town of St. Martin's and shattered the sense of safety and community that had defined this quiet place for generations. Patty says she misses her daughter's kindness most of all, Elizabeth's incredible ability to see the good in everyone and everything, even when that goodness wasn't readily apparent. She was a friendly, innocent young girl who was excited about her starring role in the school play, who loved playing with her friends and siblings, who found joy in the simple pleasures that make childhood so magical. Her life was stolen from her in the most terrifying way imaginable. And the damage done to so many people on that day, to her family, to her community, to everyone who loved her, will be felt forever. Elizabeth Olten would have turned 24 years old this year. She should be finishing college, maybe starting a career, falling in love, thinking about her future. Instead, she's buried in a small cemetery in Missouri, her life reduced to a pink headstone and the memories of those who loved her. But her story doesn't end with her death. It continues every time someone like you chooses to listen, chooses to remember, chooses to ensure that her name and her memory live on. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed, I'm honestly curious, what's holding you back? Drop it in the comments. I actually want to know. Thank you for staying with us through this incredibly difficult case. If you found this video important, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us continue to tell these stories, to give voices to victims who can no longer speak for themselves, and to ensure that cases like Elizabeth's are never forgotten. Rest in peace, Elizabeth Olten. You deserved so much better than the hand you were dealt. Your memory will live on in the hearts of everyone who has heard your story.